Hey, you guys, welcome to Reports on China. I am Andy Borham. Today, I'm just in my studio wanting to have a bit of a sit down and have a bit of a discussion with you guys about the important meeting yesterday, last night, between Presidents Xi Jinping of China and Joe Biden of the US, obviously in Bali, Indonesia. They chatted for about 3 hours, which is quite a long time, and that is before the G20 Summit, which kicked off today. So a very important meeting. Now, Western media are saying that, it was an important meeting, but nothing much was achieved. I beg to differ. I think a lot was achieved in yesterday's bilateral meeting, and I'll go over that shortly. But first, I think one of the important things that we need to do is actually look at the official transcripts. Well, this isn't a transcript. This is a readout. It's kind of a summary, I guess, of what was discussed from Joe Biden's side. Obviously, what we're going to get here is less media twist and more of each side's pure thoughts, I guess. So, yeah, this just goes through. President Joseph R. Biden Jr. met on November 14 with President Xi Jinping of the People's Republic of China, blah, 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 blah. And outlines a bit about what they talked about from his perspective. So we have here climate change, global macroeconomic stability, including debt relief and global food security, and so on. Of course, we have the usual human rights, quote unquote, issues, quote unquote, that Western leaders feel pressured to bring up every time they meet with Chinese officials. And here he's talking about concerns about PRC practices in Xinjiang, Tibet, and Hong Kong, and human rights more broadly. And then here is, at least from the Chinese side, the main issue, which is Taiwan. Now, President Biden has reiterated again that the US outlook on Taiwan has not changed, and that is that they are following what they've always followed, which is the one China policy, which sees that there's only one China, that Taiwan is part of China, and that Beijing is the legitimate government of all of China. But of course, as we've seen, especially recently, the US says one thing and does another. And I'll quickly remind you guys of my video, which you can go and watch on my channel, outlining Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi. She's an evil witch, basically. Thankfully, she's out of power, relatively out of power now. She will no longer be the Speaker of the House, which is excellent news. And, as we've said all along, probably one of the main reasons she headed to Taiwan in August was to cement some kind of hideous legacy of some kind. So she achieved that. She caused a lot of damage. And as I'll get into very shortly, some of that damage, namely China cutting off communications with the US in key areas, is hopefully back on track. And that is because of last night's meeting. So yeah, I recommend you guys go and check out these kind of official statements. And of course, if you want to see Xi Jinping's official point of view, I guess, of the whole meeting yesterday, the 3-hour-long meeting, you can visit Xinhua News Agency, and they have everything here in English, obviously, and other languages if you prefer. Of course, here, one of the main issues for China is Taiwan, and President Xi Jinping mentioned very clearly that that is a definite core interest, a really bright red line that the US cannot cross. He mentioned also that Taiwan is a matter for Chinese. It's an internal affair. So Joe Biden accepted that that was the case, and that the US will continue to do what they've always done since 1972, which is to agree that there's only one China, that Taiwan is part of China, and that Beijing is the legitimate government of all of China. So that's important. We'll see what happens, though, because as I said before, a lot of what Joe Biden says based on basically their type of governance. Obviously, Joe Biden doesn't have a lot of power in and of himself. So what he says oftentimes cannot be carried out or will not be carried out by other people in the US government sphere. According to Xinhua News Agency, the meeting did achieve something, which was that the US and Chinese presidents agreed on a number of issues, which is important. Like here, the two presidents agreed that their respective diplomatic teams should maintain strategic communication and conduct regular consultations. Their financial teams will continue dialogue and coordination on macroeconomic policies, economic ties, and trade. They also reached common understandings on conducting dialogue and cooperation in public health, agriculture, and food security, and agreed to make good use of the China-US Joint Working Group to promote the resolution of more issues. They also agreed that people-to-people exchange is very important and pledged to encourage the expansion of such exchange in all sectors. And also, they've also announced that Secretary of State Antony Blinken will visit China in the near future. So some very definite gains made from yesterday's meeting, contrary to what Western media say. I just want to say, if you see this picture here of Joe Biden and President Xi Jinping, I think that is genuine. Those are genuine smiles on their faces, you guys. So I'm really hoping, based on this friendly image, that we can see things moving forward and that relationship getting a bit better between the two largest economies in the world. And as President Xi mentioned during his discussion, it's not just important for the two countries that they get along. It's important for the whole world. It's important for all of us. It affects everybody. So everyone, I think, is really hoping that after this meeting, things can start looking up. But as I say, I think these are two genuinely very happy people, glad to see each other and get this discussion going. I just want to also add, because some people said that that President Xi Jinping stood by the flags and wouldn't move towards Joe Biden. He waited for Joe Biden to approach him, and that it was a power play. I don't agree, you guys. I think that's pushing it a bit far. I do have a video here. Okay, here's the video which people were talking about. See, Joe Biden is walking up from afar and President Xi stays firm. But actually, I think all that happened was a bit of a logistics issue where President Xi was just there already and waiting in the spot for the world's media to take photos and video, placed in front, central, in front of those flags that have been put up. So, of course, he had to wait. He's not going to go rush off stage to meet Joe Biden. So I don't think that was any kind of a power play. So, yeah, definitely interesting meeting last night. Now, I want to show you guys a little bit of Western media coverage, especially some that I obviously don't quite agree with, especially when it comes to this piece from the foreignpolicy.com. Now, this is a really dramatic headline. Xi-Biden meeting may help end China's destructive isolation. Beijing has become dangerously locked off from the world. Now, if you guys will remember that meme of the so-called international community, which is just the US and its close allies, including Japan and South Korea, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, the UK, some places in Europe. So this is definitely a very Western-centric headline and a Western-centric argument, which I think is completely irrelevant. China is definitely not isolated from the world by any means. China has some very fruitful and healthy relationships with many nations around the world. It just so happens that a lot of those nations are in the global south. So they're often ignored a bit by the West, who have this kind of superiority complex. So I don't think foreign policy are doing a good job there. Here we are on bbc.com. Xi-Biden meeting. US leader promises no new Cold War with China. Now, it's interesting that he says no new Cold War with China, because many would argue that there is already a Cold War in place between the US and China, at least on the US's part, who have been pushing to really stymie China's growth and damage it economically and also damage its relations with other parts of the world. That has been something that the US has been doing. And that is the very definition of Cold War, this kind of economic and propaganda attack, short of what they call a hot war, which would be actual bombing. So it's good that Biden says that no new Cold War, but is that going to mean an end to the current Cold War that many people would argue is going on right now? Wall Street Journal, pretty fair headline here. President Biden, Xi Jinping move to stabilize US-China relations. That is definitely, I think, what the both sides have been aiming for, which is awesome. And on npr.org, there's this brief summary of some of the things that were discussed. So obviously the two sides have considerable disagreements. Yes, we all know that. Taiwan is a hot issue there. Both Biden and Xi came into the meeting with domestic political wins at their backs. Kind of. Biden wasn't thrashed as much as he was expected to be. I don't think you could call that political wind, though. I don't know. It depends on your point of view. But on Twitter, you may have noticed that China's Hua Chunying, who is a foreign ministry spokesperson, very famous, went along with President Xi to the meeting. Now, she was sitting on the table to the right of Xi, the far right of Xi, during that meeting. And she's had some interesting and timely takes, including some flashbacks on her Twitter. So if you want to check it out, it's at spokesperson CHN. That's on Twitter. Very interesting to follow her, especially in this regard, since she is there. But also, I just wanted to lastly show you guys this, because China's position, especially when it comes to things like the Ukraine crisis, has been very consistent and very clear from the beginning. China does not support the military conflict that's going on there. China wants it to end ASAP by peaceful means, and China has always said that. And the way you can find out is by checking out the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the People's Republic of China, where they have the spokesperson's remarks. And every day, on the day, the meetings, even though they're in Mandarin Chinese, are translated into English and posted online. So here we'll just choose one randomly. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian, regular press conference on November 11. And you have all of the questions that were asked of him and then the English translations in full. So this is where you can find some really useful information about China's stance on certain issues direct from the horse's mouth, without having to go and read these often twisted Western media representations. So yeah, that's basically it, you guys. Basically, I think that the 3-hour meeting yesterday between President Biden and Xi Jinping was very fruitful. A lot of people in the Western media are saying that not much was achieved. It was more about having a friendly meetup for the first time in 5 years, but I think a lot was achieved. And we'll see that coming to fruition over the coming weeks and months, hopefully. Hopefully, especially from the US side, which is the side that is known for not sticking to their word. Hopefully they will try to stick to their word, especially now that Biden has new impetus to keep going for the next 2 years. We'll see what happens in 2024. But yeah, at least in the next 2 years, I hope to see those relations come back on track. And I want to show you guys just one more time that awesome photo, which I think is really, really, it's just lovely. It is President Xi Jinping and President Joe Biden together with very genuine smiles on their faces. So hopefully that kind of relationship will keep going, and we'll see, as I said, benefit for the whole world, because that is what we need right now. Thank you guys so much for watching. Do let me know what you think down below. And as always, I will see you next time. Bye-bye.